Hey everybody, this is Larry the Cable Guy. Check this out. So I'm in my truck driving with my buddy, and we was heading up to the men's warehouse to fart in the suits, and he's listening to his phone, and I said, that sounds like Hermie Sadler. He said, it is Hermie Sadler. He's got a podcast called Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator. I said, Sadler and the Senator? He said, yeah, that's his good buddy, Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley. I said, well, what in the world? He didn't know this. I said, did you know that Hermie Sadler was voted one of the 50 best looking drivers in NASCAR? He said, I did not know that. I said, because it ain't true. You never know, though. He never takes off his helmet. But I know one thing. This show, Leaning Right, Turning Left, is good. So pull up a chair right there by your phone, get yourself a cold beer, and give a listen right here to this week's episode of Leaning Right, Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator. I'll tell you what, I bet Michael Waltrip's even listening. He's always wanted to do something like that. Oh, Sadler, got another one over on Waltrip. Get her done!
I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley, hanging out high atop Wintergreen Mountain with my homies, and I'm leaning right.
And I'm Hermie Sadler, turning left, leaning right, and turning left is back. Again, as always, powered by Pacematic.
How you doing, Herm?
Senator, how are you?
I'm doing great. Good morning to you. This is being taped right now on the 12th of September, so you're going to get this in the next couple days. We've got a lot to talk about today, but you know what? We couldn't do this podcast without our swear bear, without our man purse, without our fanny pack, so to say. Shep Moss! Shep Moss is here. Hi, Shep.
Finally back from vacation, I might add.
This is kind of my vacation, not kind of like what you do. You're usually in the Caribbean or what, Virginia Beach.
It's rare for you to vacation in the continental United States. Normally he's Bahamas or Hawaii, but when he does do the beaches, he goes down the coastline. He's Virginia Beach and Emerald Isle and Atlantic Beach, Topsail Beach, Myrtle Beach. He's in dining in exotic locations and hanging out with fancy people. And so we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to joining us up here at Wintergreen. So, Bill, we need to tell people that not necessarily related to the podcast.
He's a son of a beach, isn't he? Shep Moss,
he's just a big old beach.
And I'm sorry that here at Wintergreen we have this beautiful vista.
It is gorgeous.
But there ain't no beach. There ain't no sand. So, but welcome, Shep.
Thank you.
But not related to the podcast necessarily, but tell the people why we are in Wintergreen for these couple days.
Well, and I think we're going to dive deeper into it as we talk, but we're up here getting ready for your trial. Your trial commences once again for the final injunction in the Skill Games lawsuit that we filed, over 2 years ago?
Yeah.
And so we're getting ready for it. So this is a planning session for that trial. We've got some of our attorney team that's coming up here, and we're going to sit down and map out our roadmap for victory. And so we've got a lot of work to do, but we're doing this before we get that started. We're going to start about noon today when everybody's flying in, and then for the next 3 days, we're going to be working really hard so that we win this case again for like the umpteenth time. But this time, the hearing that's coming up in December is a final hearing on the injunction itself. So we're pretty excited about it. We're happy where we are right now, where we've been. It's amazing to me, Hermie, that we're still doing this case and that the temporary injunction is in place. But this should have been resolved a long time ago. And the people that have been dragging their feet, I would say, is the Attorney General's office. Yeah. And the people that have really dragged their feet and kept nearly $750 million out of the coffers.
Billion?
$750 million in tax revenue that they passed
they
off.
could have collected by now if they'd have just
to help our schools and military.
Right, and they've been screwing around. Exactly. Poverty, helping kids break the cycle of poverty. There's so many good things you could do with that money. But right now we're under the monopoly and the control of those casinos that do not want skill games in our convenience stores, in our truck stops, in our bars and our restaurants, helping small businesses in Virginia survive and thrive. They want to have a monopoly where only they dictate what happens and who controls this new gambling industry that we've created in Virginia, which I was against from the beginning and still am. But now that we've opened the door, what we've allowed are those interests from Chicago and from Kentucky and from Las Vegas to control Virginia and to dictate what goes on in Virginia, to the point that they don't care about Virginia because they're willing to keep $750 million away from the coffers in our treasury because it's more important for them to control the marketplace.
Okay, so we're going to take a deeper dive into that as we prepare to go back to trial in December. You've got some things going on related to, you have nobly represented the Smith family in Loudoun County. There have been some big-time developments in that we want to talk about on the podcast today. We got a little bit of golf that we did yesterday to maybe give a drive-by of what happened on golf. But, Shep, you mentioned, and I think it's the right thing to do at the top of the show as we are taping. Yesterday is 9/11. As we are taping today, it's September the 12th. But you brought up, and Bill and I both agreed here at the top of the show to just to take a moment and remember back to 9/11 and pay our respects to all the families of the victims and what a life-changing day for so many people. Your thoughts?
Do you remember where you were when it happened?
I do.
I do too. I was in our motorcycle dealership, and we had the TV on in the lobby in the waiting area there at the service department. And of course, a news alert came up, and you just saw the footage of those planes crashing. And I remember the fear and not knowing, well, how many planes, how many buildings, what's going to happen, what's going on. Can you go through a tunnel? Can you cross a bridge? And, here it is now, 22 years. We're still fighting this in many different ways. And, some of the adversaries are different countries now than maybe it was then. But this whole terrorism thing, we live in the greatest country in the world, but we're still being handcuffed by people far away and things that we're having to do. I just traveled, as y'all talked about, going to the Bahamas, and to go through TSA and to go through the airport, and you can't carry a bottle of shampoo or hair gel with you on your carry-on.
You're not a verified
because of things
with all your travels. You're not verified.
I am verified now.
Come on through.
Oh, they did that. Yes, they did that. $100 bill greased me right on through.
No body cavity search for you.
No.
Did you go up there to the
I didn't
TSA
have to
guy?
cough this time.
I'm going to give you 10 minutes.
I had to cough at Punta Cana, not at Nassau.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So where were you, Herm?
I was actually upstairs at my house, which is now like a pool room and a movie room as I've gotten older. Used to be a workout facility. And I remember working out. We were getting ready to go. We were getting ready to, that evening, I was getting ready to go to the airport to fly to Loudoun, New Hampshire to race.
Really?
And I remember being upstairs in the gym, so to speak, at my house that day, and like everybody else, kind of working out, halfway watching TV, and then to watch that thing progress to what happened, and then 5 or 6 minutes later,
something else happened.
The whole thing just started to unfold in front of our very eyes, and it was scary. It was, ultimately, they ended up postponing the race that weekend.
They shut down the flight.
Yeah, we didn't end up not going. But I remember packing and getting ready to go to New Hampshire that weekend and then seeing all that. But it's what a traumatic experience. And then over the course of time, I've gotten to know some people that had loved ones that, Zelina Vega, the wrestler for WWE, sweet girl, her dad died. At 9/11, and so every time it rolls around, I think about all those thousands and thousands and thousands of people that lost their lives and all the effects of that we still feel today. To your point about the airport and otherwise, and just a day that changed the course of history here in the United States. And I remember, President George Bush.
With the megaphone,
like him or don't like him, I thought he was tremendous.
A real leader.
During that time, trying to unite and rally and speaking with authority, speaking, with just really, I thought, some of the positives that came of that, very few, but I thought President Bush was was the right man at the right time for that, and
I thought he was very uniting.
Well, remember
when he
went
and stood on the rubbish.
He was with that bullhorn, and they were wondering. They were saying, "Can you hear us?" And he said, I can hear you, and they're going to hear from all of us soon.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was pretty poignant, standing on the rubble right there, and especially when you compare that to the leadership or lack thereof that we have right now. Somebody who won't even travel to Maui when there's a horrible, tragic fire, blames it on climate change, and won't even go to Palestine, Ohio, where that awful train wreck occurred. That's the difference, and I think you miss those days. I was actually getting ready for a murder trial in Arlington, going up the Arlington Peninsula on Wilson Boulevard when it happened, and clearly it was a murder trial that got canceled that day. Got to the courthouse, turned right around, called my office staff, said, go home. And I told them all to get their family, gather them up, and drive down to the lake where I had a lake house at the time, but I was still practicing in Fairfax. And I can remember driving on 66. I threw my Beagle in the car, my first Beagle, Sydney, my cat in the car, no clothes, and we headed out. And it was amazing how the traffic was starting to really get frantic. Not just, in Northern Virginia, traffic is pretty backed up a lot of times. This was like frantic driving. And the two things I remember, and I'm listening to the radio as I'm heading west, away from, Washington, D.C., the Pentagon was burning, where my dad worked for so many years. The sky was the most majestic blue I'd ever seen. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. And the thing that I saw the most was jets flying overhead. And not airplanes, commercial airplanes.
Jets.
Fighter
jets.
And they went streaking across the sky in pairs of two towards Washington, D.C. as I headed west. Got down to Smith Mountain Lake, Franklin County, and my mother, who we had the office down there as well, and my mother, who was practicing law at the time, we looked at each other and said, that's enough of Fairfax. We are not going to live in this place. And I remember saying to her that we will never know the freedoms. My biggest fear was we would never know the freedoms that we had on September 10th ever again.
Right.
And that's been borne out to be true.
It's been true. Absolutely.
And, you're describing that even in going to the airport, having to go through all those checks before. You just walk onto the tarmac, you'd walk right through the gates. Nobody questioned you. That was one thing that never happened.
I can remember
again.
When we were doing the wrestling shows, and this was 4 or 5 years after 9/11, but we did a couple at schools and one at a military base. And just the inspections and the searches that we had to go through with the equipment trucks to get on the base or to get on the campuses. You never had to do that before 9/11.
Right.
The dogs, the bomb-sniffing dogs, the mirrors under the trailer. That was just something you never had to experience before. And now it's really become everyday life. It just has.
I remember I used to go pick up my father up from the Pentagon after work. And you could drive right up to the steps. And he'd be waiting right there at the steps. Yeah. I remember going by the Pentagon after that, and of course they have these huge concrete barricades that you couldn't even get within, I'd say, 3 football fields of the building. Understandably so, but how the world changed, but how our world in terms of freedom changed. One, we also appreciated the freedom that we probably were taking for granted. And what I really remember is that week where it was a horrible tragedy, stunning to everybody. But on the 12th, and the 13th, those many years ago, I don't think we were ever more united than we were.
Well, I was going to say the sense of patriotism.
The flags on the cars.
Oh, absolutely.
Waving at everybody. You weren't a Democrat or a Republican or an independent.
You were American.
You were an American. That's exactly right, Shep. And so I think over time, we've kind of lost that in
I agree.
a major way. I think we're more divisive than we've ever been, which I don't think then bears out what we should have learned from 9/11. And, and I was even with my wife, and Chandler was doing a kind of a book report thing where he had to interview somebody who was alive during 9/11. Of course, and I forgot, my son is, 12 years old and wasn't experiencing it. And so he interviewed my wife, Laura, and she talked about where she was at that moment. That was part of what was required. And as they were doing this interview, and I think for the first time, a 12-year-old was realizing it was September 11th. It was yesterday morning. I was getting ready to come here, and it was on the screen as Fox replays exactly what was going on in the radio transmissions and the reporting that was going on and the falling of the towers. And my son was transfixed. And so I think, maybe I've not done a good job explaining it to my son because the next generation has no idea. They weren't born on 9/11, 2001. They didn't understand the tragedy and also the triumph that came with it, the resolve of America that came from it. And I think it's such an important, critical lesson because we were there and we'll never forget. But we also remember where you were. It's like, the earlier generations would say, do you know where you were when John F. Kennedy was assassinated? Well, for us, it's where were you on 9/11? And so I think we need to make sure that we teach that new generation that very important lesson. And I hope somehow we remember how important that is and somehow we become united again. That's my biggest hope for America. My biggest fear is we're not going to ever be united.
Well, right now we've gone from such a moment of patriotism to now we don't know which bathroom to go in.
Right.
We don't know.
Well, I hope you do.
We don't know what adjective to call each other anymore. We went from that one or pronoun. We went from that one moment.
We've got some adjectives for you. You want to hear them?
But yeah, we'll do that in a minute.
Want to hear? Here we go.
But my point is, we went from such a moment of patriotism and being united, to your point, back to divisiveness. Now we don't even know. I mean, this generation that's come after 9/11, man, they got a lot of challenges ahead of them. That's all I can say. It's really sad where we are.
Well, I would, with y'all's permission, let's dedicate this show
Absolutely
to all the victims and their families, the first responders, everybody that felt the devastation, which we all did in our own little way, but obviously those closer to it, we'd like to dedicate this show to all those brave men and women and their families, and that is just if you think back on it now, just an unbelievable day, unbelievable turn of events. And it's easy to talk about the negative parts, but there are some positives, that as a country we've learned from that, and it's just worth it for us to just take a moment and honor and thank and like I said, dedicate this edition of Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator to all those affected by 9/11. So what's the syllabus for the day?
Wait a minute. I do have one more question.
So always one more.
I got one question about something you mentioned.
Good in transition.
About going to Loudon. You mentioned a exercise room.
Mm-hmm.
So after our breakfast of champions this morning, which happened to consist of Rice Krispie treats.
I've had 4.
4?
4.
So I envision this exercise room with like a pull-up bar and one of the little wheels.
The value pack is 16, I see.
Yeah.
Well, one of the little wheels with the handles, you do the push-ups in the floor. You couldn't have had much more equipment than that.
I'm
looking at the condition after 22 years. I'm
going to say
south over time. On 9/11, 2001, I probably weighed about $165.
Gravity has caught up.
But I had it was like a machine. I had it in my race shop in Chesterfield that had a push-up bar, pull-up bar. It was a
station.
Workstation, Ford workstation machine that I had taken out of my shop and actually put in my home. So I had that and the other little barbells and stuff. And I had
So those cables obviously have broken over time.
Well, I don't know. That thing has been gone a long time. And I still to this day have a sauna in my house. Back in those days, I used to use the sauna to help prepare for
the heat
in the summer. Put it on about 110 and stay in there for 30 and 45-minute intervals back in those days. Today, I would break a sweat walking up the steps to get to the sauna, much less getting in the sauna. But that was a different day, a different time. But, back in those days, my ability to do my job at 100% required me to maintain a certain weight. Back in those days, the cars, the weight was with the driver. So my team was relying on me to weigh a consistent weight, not only be light enough
to stay legal,
to put the weight low in the car and the frame rails and all that. But, if I showed up, we didn't want to be, how could I ask the guys in the shop to work an extra 4 or 5 hours to make my car 10 pounds lighter so we could put more lead and get a low center of gravity? get 10 pounds out of the car if I showed up 10 pounds overweight. So that was a different time, different thing.
No Rice Krispie treats.
No Rice Krispie treats.
So, but didn't you lose a lot of weight when you're in the car? I mean, it's so hot. When you leave, like 8-9 pounds.
On a hot day, Southern 500 weekend, you could do 12, 14 pounds.
Hermie calls that water weight.
Water weight.
What do we call it today? Mine's just fat weight.
Rice Krispie weight.
So let me go back to my question, Bill, just so the people that are tuned in, what are we going to cover
All right,
today?
well, let's talk about, we came up here yesterday. We decided to come up here a little earlier so we could tape this podcast. We're going to, like I said, get started on the legal stuff around noontime. So we came up to Wintergreen. We brought the Shepper. You weren't Facebook Live here when we were teeing off.
Yeah.
And we played a round of golf, which was
Long.
different. And I had not played. The last time I played was with you guys at a charity event for autism. Mm-hmm. And actually, we recorded a podcast there too. Mm-hmm. And so I had not picked up the clubs in over almost just exactly a year.
Yeah, because it's Friday again.
So I was a little rusty. I bought a dozen balls at the pro shop. I came back with the box, I think, and
some balls we found.
You were finding balls but the front nine, I was horrific. I hit a good tee shot to start the day, and then just fell apart until I had to relearn how to play golf, where my stance was, where the ball should be my stance. Especially with the different clubs and how to chip and how to putt. It was like starting over. And I used to play a lot of golf, and I used to not be so bad. I was horrible.
But on the back nine, you got it together.
Beat Shep on the back nine.
Y'all had a
Shep waxed
tale
me on the
of
front
two
nine.
halves.
Yeah.
Shep, was a little bit sharper on the front. You were finding your game on the back nine. You probably had 5 or 6 pars on the back nine.
Yeah.
And
a
Shep,
couple blow-ups.
I'm not sure finished a hole on the back nine.
There was a few holes I just
He
picked
was in the
up.
cart a lot.
And one of the biggest arguments y'all had on the golf course is on one hole, the one bad hole you had on the back nine, you hit about a 300-yard drive.
Yeah, it was pretty big.
And
Just like old times.
The
All
problem
downhill.
is
All downhill.
your second shot was only about 60 yards to get to the green,
With a water feature.
but there
in
was a
front of it.
ditch
Yes.
with a
a
little
lot of
branch
rocks.
running through it.
A lot of
So
rocks.
you hit 3 or 4 balls in the water.
It looked like Tin Cup, actually,
Yeah.
at the end. When
Well, he
just
kept getting
dropping
closer
balls.
to the ditch.
But
and
that
he
part
kept
wasn't
getting
funny.
shorter.
The funny part was you had about a 6-foot left to right breaker for a 9. If not,
might have
you
been
got
an
to
11.
put a double-digit number on the scorecard.
And he made it.
And you were worried about putting that number on the scorecard, and Shep was going to give himself an 8, and he hadn't hit a ball since the tee box.
He's actually going into the woods, picking up other people's balls that he found.
And he
started throwing them at me as I put one in the drink, and then 2 in the
Throw
drink,
one at
and
the
then
cart.
3 in the drink.
I don't want to mischaracterize, but you were adamant, slightly angry, agitated that Shep was going to, let's just call it DNF the hole, did not finish.
Gonna get a lower
and
score.
gonna get a lower score than you, who labored over 4 shots over the branch to get a 10.
That is correct. And quite frankly, I didn't think it fair or just. And then Shep does that. Well, you just write down what you want to write. I got my scorecard back here in the cart. You write your scorecard down in the cart, and we'll just see. And I'm like, there is no effing way that you get a lower score than I did, because at least I played the whole.
The people know by now we have no intentions of rewarding Shep for quitting.
Well, listen.
He shepped on the golf
I quit a
course.
few
He
holes.
Shep's on the golf course.
I did have to quit a few holes.
That was pretty amazing, because he was playing pretty good golf in the front end. I mean, he
Well,
hit
the
ball pretty
first,
good on
the
front
first
nine.
tee box, I did not get it to the ladies' tees.
And you did not do the traditional pulling out your, what'd you say, tallywhacker?
Tallywhacker.
And walking the Texas 2-step or whatever.
But what people need to understand, Bill actually had the longest drive of the day until the last hole. and Hermie got up there. He swole up a little bit.
Yeah.
I think some of that water weight got off of him from sweating. And he blistered a hook draw around a tree that's at least 6 feet in diameter. Hit a knoll.
Oh, well, wait a minute. It was only about 18 feet off the ground. It was a line drive.
Hit a knoll and skipped about 125 yards past us down the fairway. It was an amazing shot.
He played impressive golf all the way through. But, what I did notice is that when you guys are playing well, you start swearing when you miss putts.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it sounds not enjoyable. For me, I just hadn't played in a year, so I was out with two of my besties and was having a good time, except you rode me like I had a saddle for the first 6 holes, and I was about ready to punch you in the throat.
I rode you hard and put you up wet.
I mean, whoa, hey.
I made the comment one time.
Hey.
Y'all two sound like a bunch of kindergartners out there. But
Shep knows how to get under my skin. Nobody gets under my skin, but I swear, I
Look,
wanted to
I
wrap my
didn't-
7-iron around him.
I didn't add up the scores. I don't think we should. But
I got the card.
Shep, I'm going to say 5 of the 9 holes he did not complete. So he shot probably
200.
in the mid 50s to 60 on the back 9 alone. And as we're walking off the 18th tee, we all clean up, putt, get up. Shep and Bill, he was being serious.
I really was
He
being
looked at me and said, I tell you what now, I hit my 5-iron good today. And I'm like,
I did. Now look,
what?
It was all the shots in between the 5-iron.
On it was hole,
I could have put it with
it
the
was hole
5-iron.
number 6, which is like 15 on Shamokin, which is of course
It's
the
3
golf
9-hole
course
courses where we
on
played.
Stony Creek at Wintergreen.
Yeah.
And so I want to show you what I wrote.
They're hard courses.
And remember, we were fighting the whole time about, and that's where I 3-chunked it into the creek.
Yeah.
Like tin cup.
I mean, the
And
divot
so
went
I
further
must
than
have
the
missed
ball.
putt because
Now you got a 10.
I wrote down my I wrote down a 10. Look what I put him down at.
19.
Slightly close to my handicap.
So, I think I did some fair scoring on that one.
Yeah.
But you
But
can
he
see-
sure did. He was
I was
like a
serious.
kid looking for, reinforcement. He said, I tell you what, I had really hit my 5 wood good today.
I mean,
I'm
good contact.
Shit, what the hell are you talking about?
Unbelievable.
On a serious note, I think you will agree, Hermie had the shot of the day on the par 3. When he hit it like 2 feet from the pin on the par 3.
By that time, I was so white hot at you, I probably didn't.
And then I missed an 18-inch putt for
At least-
birdie.
Yeah, I mean,
Good
he
ball.
missed it. He missed nice ball.
Heck, one time he was putting for eagle, didn't even know it.
Yeah.
On par 5. So he was playing real well, real consistent. I mean, his scorecard looks like it probably should.
'Cause wasn't-
But you also been playing like 3 days in a row by the time.
Well,
you
we
hit
had
up.
our member guest in South Hill this past weekend.
and a ringer, Jimmy.
Jimmy Clay, yeah, and we won our flight, so it was good. We shot 68, 66, had a good time, and I have been playing some, but
Wasn't
I'm ready-
your
I'm ready.
I shot on the front.
I'm ready for
Bill? Wasn't your longest drive, and then you chunked him? Isn't that when Hermie said, "Nice drive, Bill"?
Yeah. And then you said 3-wood. All day you kept saying I need to pull out the 3-wood.
And that you don't even have.
I don't even have a 3-wood.
You should get one.
Well, I used to have one, but it was like the biggest waste of time because the thing would never go straight. So I just took it out of the bag and hit a 4.
And what was the difference between that and your other clubs?
At least I feel like I'm going to actually hit the other clubs when I know I'm not going
And also, I know Shep's family listens to this podcast. And about on hole number 4, you accused your son and blamed your son for taking
Having some of my
the
clubs.
clubs out of your bag. That's what caused you to shoot 104,
I have that
116.
problem as well, though.
It really affected my game mentally.
takes
But that 5-iron,
That 5-iron
you
was
lasered
on
that
fire.
5-iron.
It's a smoking hot 5-iron. You should just not. I used to play in a lot of like member guest tournaments, and I was playing in a club championship at the Waterfront Country Club in Franklin County there at the lake, and we come up and we're in the hunt, and I got a ringer, I got a Jimmy Clay, Gordon Parker's there, and we come up and we see this old man kind of hunched over, 75 years old, maybe 80, and we look in the back of his bag, and he's got a 5-iron, a wedge, and a putter.
That's it.
And we're like, we're going to smoke this old guy. And he would hit that 5-iron off of every tee, whether it's a par 3 or par 5. Stripe it right down the middle, 160, 170 yards. Hit the 5-iron again if you needed to get close, chip and a putt. And he crushed us, parred everything. Never made it.
I believe it.
And I just don't think I could get to that point. But it was very impressive.
So
you play a lot of
yesterday-
golf, you get better, huh?
Yesterday, we enjoyed one of the freedoms that we were just talking about since 9/11.
It was
And
a lot
then
of
we
fun.
had
I mean-
a hell of a meal last night. Bill cooked us some, you tell us.
Dry chicken.
No, the
Dry
chicken was
chicken.
good.
It's a little dry.
So I took some bacon. We made a wedge salad. So we did a iceberg lettuce
The
wedge.
salad was just as pretty a salad as I've ever seen.
With tomatoes, fresh bacon, and some feta cheese crumbles, and a little bit of red onion.
Yeah, you didn't buy bacon bits. You fried the bacon in the
bacon
pan
up.
and
Yeah,
crumbled
well,
it up. Yeah.
Bacon bits are fake bits. I mean,
Yeah.
that's not bacon. And then Shep and I, when we went to the IGA, it's a really small grocery store down here. He and I, we just stood in front of the condiment aisle right there with the salad dressings, and we could not decide what to get. There's about, what you said, 6 different flavors of ranch. And I grabbed this keto-friendly Russian dressing,
I mean, a Republican
which was the worst.
elected official grabbing a Russian dressing.
Putin dressing. So that was
makes
part
no
of, that was
sense.
the
That
opening.
tasted like nothing.
It was crap, and I'm sorry about that because it ruined what otherwise was a pretty.
It was a beautiful salad, had great flavor. It just, I think we over-engineered on the dressing. It would have been so easy just to pick up some ranch dressing and roll
But
it.
Ma Bell's
and then
rice. Wow.
Hermie made this rice dish, which was, I think,
My mom's
delicious.
secretary
I've saved-
recipe. Yep.
Yep, we've saved some of it. I'm going to eat some of it again today.
Yeah.
It was delicious.
And then I made my chicken where I took the bacon grease and I cut the chicken into larger chunks from a breast, and then sauteed them in the bacon to get them kind of crispy on each side, and then put them together with some bell pepper or red peppers,
really
yellow
was good,
peppers,
Senator.
a little red onion, and in the Stubbs chicken marinade, and then cooked that up, and then that's what we ate with Mama Bell's rice recipe.
It was
which I thought
really,
good.
really good.
I mean, it was so good. It was so good that we then sat down. We had some cocktails. We had a couple shots of Fireball. We tried to do a podcast that just didn't get off
It
the
got
ground.
derailed.
It was not a good attempt, but at least we were smart enough to understand that the effort wasn't good enough. And then we stayed up for a while watching that football game where Aaron Rodgers.
No,
went down
y'all
in 4
made a
plays.
lot of executive decisions that affected Hermie without Hermie being involved in the decisions after I went to bed.
And,
Well, you
and,
gave him power of attorney.
and actually, though, Herm, you had to share a room with Shep last night, did
I
you
did.
not? And you had to endure perhaps something that no man or woman should have to endure, but unfortunately, due to the marital bounds and the law, Shep's wife has to endure. And I think you recorded it, didn't you? Didn't you give us a little thing here?
Oh, wow. That's me? I didn't bring my CPAP.
Oh my goodness! I mean, I would have called the plumber or something to fix that.
I'm looking at the ceiling at 4:00 in the morning. But we made it. And
Hang on.
Shep said I snore too.
Let me read you my text to my wife this morning. Hang on. Give me a second.
She already knows I snore.
I'm sure. So this is this morning at 6:49. I'm going to try to sleep about an hour now. Hermie has snored all night, and I haven't slept a wink. That was at
So
6:49.
you heard what I recorded.
Yeah, I think-
And he's going to try to say he didn't sleep a wink. Okay.
You know, evidence is actually the deciding factor in criminal cases, civil cases, and also here in this.
But let's be
debate.
honest. Let's just get this podcast is about transparency and honesty. After I went to bed, y'all sat here on the patio and made some executive decisions related to the podcast and otherwise that I didn't get alerted to, was not involved in. I didn't get alerted to it until this morning.
Well, and here we are, and I think this is going swimmingly. So compared to last night, which we were swimming in it, but so we're going to talk about some things. We've had some things popping up. We talked a little bit about it, but I want to talk now. Since we've gotten our golf conversation out and our snoring done.
What a fun day, though.
Yeah, that was a great time. And thanks for that, because I don't get a lot of that. I mean,
That was fun.
You even said to me on the golf course, you'd think with all your corporate clients and your clients, you'd be out here playing a lot of golf. And in my trial work, it just doesn't happen that way. And I always like to say, show me a lawyer with a low handicap, and I'll show you a lawyer that doesn't try a case. Because
Right.
you just don't have the time. But interestingly enough, here in Virginia, we're making international news with one of our candidates for the Virginia House of Delegates out of Henrico.
Wow.
And you might have seen this. This is from the Daily Mail, which is, of course, the UK's newspaper. and now has gotten national attention. I was on the John Reed show this morning at 8 o'clock. We were talking about this as well as talking about the Scott Smith case. But there is Susanna Gibson.
I can't log in to see it in Virginia anymore.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute, too. May have been my bill,
how do I see it?
my law. But Susanna Gibson is now refusing to drop out. What she was doing was going on these Chatterbait, which is a website, paid website.
What bait?
Chatterbait, it's
Oh.
called. It's kind of like combining the word masturbation with chatting, I guess. And then would do live feeds with her husband out into the general public of people that would watch this live or watch the recording and taped afterwards of her doing sex acts.
Do they have to pay to watch it?
I believe so. In fact, she was saying on the thing, hey, look, and I hate to use this language, but I'm going to try. You can, to her husband, you can F me in the A if they'll pay. And they'll pay means the people that were watching it live. And she said, I'm
For a
raising
small
money.
fee.
I'm raising money for a good cause. The question is,
What's the cause?
Is she raising money for her campaign by doing this? Because this is crazy.
I wonder if Hermie wasn't snoring. Maybe he was chatterbaiting.
So the Daily Mail's title is Susanna Gibson refuses to drop out of Virginia race after videos emerge of her performing sex acts with her husband online for tips. Democratic candidate and mom of two, 40, says Republicans are trying to silence women. She's actually now gone out. She's asked the Henrico Commonwealth's attorney to investigate because she's saying she's a victim now
Whoa.
of revenge porn. Can you believe this?
That's
She's
illegal.
the victim for being called out for something she's doing on social media or on platforms in the public square of the internet. That is crazy. Number one, I've always been looking for new and interesting ways of raising money, but I just don't think I can get there with what she's trying to do.
Your OnlyFans
How
page ain't going to
disgraceful.
be real successful.
There would be nothing to see. And but how disgraceful is that? And now she's playing the victim card. I'm the victim. See, that's what liberals and Democrats always do. I'm being victimized for putting your hiney out there, doing sex acts, and now she's the victim. Shep actually went onto the website, and it does not have, he did not go any further. It does not have the filter, the porn filter that from the law that I passed. And for investigation purposes, you watched how many hours of video just to make sure that you understood?
About 12.
12. And no wonder he was snoring. He was tired. But can you believe this? I mean, she refuses to step down, which is ridiculous. She's cuckolding her husband, quite frankly.
She's who and her
Because
husband?
she has an open relationship.
She's doing what?
Cuckold.
Cuckold.
Cuckold. It's the old English term for cheating on your husband. So the husband becomes the
Gotcha.
cuck.
The cuck.
The cuck. He's cuckold. And that's true. It's
But
English.
look, this is 2023, and people have different views. And how do you think this will ultimately affect her? Because the way as sad as things are now, in a lot of ways in 2023, I look at this and say, "Oh, that's going to make her even more popular with a group of liberal people that." I mean, it may get her more
Embolden her,
recognition.
Well, certainly she's now known across the world. But she even said,
she walked down the street now, and nobody's going to recognize her. She said, "I don't recognize you with your clothes on."
Does she have a tattoo, Senator?
I have no idea. But this is her quote when it was released.
I bet she's
and
got
she
a
was asked
tattoo.
about it in the media. And again, I talked about it today on the John Reed show. Quote, she says, "It won't intimidate me and it won't silence me," Gibson said, while blaming Republicans for trying to derail her campaign. Lady, I think you did a pretty good job. The train.
She got
The train.
railed by the
So do
train.
you think she will? You
Has
think
been
she will ultimately
derailed.
drop out of the race?
No, I really don't. I think they're so brash and
You don't
bold.
think Louise Lucas will call her and say, "Hey, take one for the
Well,
team"?
it's a
and
House
get
of
out?
Delegates, so it'd be Don Scott. He's the minority leader down there. I don't, because I just think in today's society, we were talking about how different the world is, and
Yeah.
now we're confused on what bathroom to use or what pronoun to use. That something like this, she's playing the victim card, which clearly she's not the victim. She says it's revenge porn. You put it on the internet yourself, trying to raise money. But we are a victim society. We're the United States of the offended. So, as long as she plays this victim role, then it turns.
Does she have
And I think the Democrat Party would be smart to say, hey, look, step aside. We need to put a more qualified person in.
Right.
Because I think it puts the seat in peril. I think the voters will turn on her, but I don't think she'll drop out. That's my opinion.
Does she have a ponytail in that video? Because we had a conversation last night about ponytails. If you remember, Hermie really had a very descriptive conversation about ponytails.
I don't recall.
I was talking to
But they
the
have
Mrs.
pictures.
Senator about it.
They have pictures of she and her husband. I mean, video clips of, I guess, what was going on.
You're still, you
And-
bookmarked it.
No, I was reading every sentence of the story. That's all slowly. But I think, again, this just shows the state of politics now. There's no disqualifier. It used to be like something like this.
Automatic.
I mean, who's the guy that ran Gary Hart? And he had an affair, and there was a picture of him with a lady on his lap.
Was he in Carolina?
On the no, that was the former senator, United States senator, but years
Edwards.
ago.
Yeah.
John Edwards.
John Edwards.
But again, see, that disqualified him.
Yeah.
And that disqualified Gary Hart in the presidential race.
have sex
With that woman, Miss Lewinsky. And well, I was involved in the Paula Jones case, of course, so Bill Clinton. My favorite line from Bill Clinton was, "It all depends on what your definition of is." In the deposition, he was asked the question, are you, in the present tense, he was asked if he was having sexual relations. And he said no. So he denied it. Remember, he was charged with perjury. And he was like, I am not currently here in the deposition having sexual relations with Miss Lewinsky. I feel your pain. So that kind of changed the dynamic. So now I think she gets away with it. But man, we never seem to disappoint here in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Do we?
Telling you.
Y'all got some nice ones over there, Billy Rose.
She's a nurse practitioner too. I mean, can your patient ever look at you the same way after that? I mean,
I bet she's got a full appointment booked now.
yeah. I mean, they're probably breaking down the door.
Is my 26-year-old too old to take to her?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty amazing. But we have no shame left in the world, so I don't think she
That'll
drops
be
out.
another
I think the
interesting
Democrats
thing.
try to get rid of her, but she's got to be the one that drops out.
Yeah.
And I don't think she'll do it as long as she.
Well,
can
she's
play
playing the victim,
card.
so she's not going to do
You
it.
know who the victim is? Her stupid husband
Her husband.
and the voter.
He's
But I think
been-
the voter will reject.
Cuckold. Cuckold.
Cuckold.
Cuckold.
Say, yeah, there you go.
Cuckold.
Cuckolding. Say it with me.
Well, another word is
Just
coddled.
coddled.
Careful. All right, so that's something that's going on in Virginia. Another thing that's going on in Virginia that you kind of touched on, Hermie, is my client Scott Smith. And for those that need to be brought up to speed, Scott Smith was the father of the student, the female student who was raped in the bathroom by a boy who was wearing a skirt that day, and he declared himself to be gender fluid, so therefore he could walk in without reproach into the women's bathroom where he then brutally raped my client. He was later convicted of that, and also convicted after that happened, because instead of suspending him, they moved him to a different school, of molesting another girl. And this was all going on in Loudoun County at the same time that Loudoun County was debating the trans bathroom policy that you kind of touched on, Shep. And in that policy, it was important for them to have a policy that allowed boys that thought they were girls for that day to use the women's restroom. That was the policy, and to use proper pronouns. They, their, he, she for a she for a he, and they were debating that. And Scott knew, and of course, the rape had occurred, and he went to the meeting as a concerned citizen to listen. Had never been involved in politics, probably a moderate Democrat-leaning plumber before that.
How long was the school board meeting after the incident? Had the other child or the other student been charged and sentenced yet?
No, the trial was ongoing.
It was ongoing.
So this was in September, and the incident happened, I believe, in May. And then what happened at the school board meeting, for those that may not have been reading the news at the time, the superintendent at the time, who's since been fired, Ziegler, in response to a question from one of the school board members, it was kind of a setup, denied that there was ever a rape in any bathroom in any public school in Loudoun County.
He lied.
Which caused the audience to erupt. I mean, there were concerned parents there, and then you had a lot of advocates for the trans policies that were there. And Scott was standing there, and he knew that to be a lie.
Did he say
so-
that because it was ongoing litigation?
No, there was no...
I mean, in fairness to him, if they were still in court, did he say that because it hadn't been gone through the process yet? Or did he, in your opinion,
lied. was
did he
covering
just
it up.
lie?
He was covering it up. And in fact,
and that's what I was getting to.
An investigation, and we're getting ready to file a Title IX lawsuit against the school on behalf of her. he was covering it up because the policy was more important than the protection of the students.
Right.
I mean, they wanted to do this politically, liberal policy because that was more important than keeping their children safe, that we as parents give to them every day to educate our child. So that caused this big disturbance. This woman, this advocate, pro-trans policy advocate, walks up to Scott and says, your daughter is a liar, basically, from what I recall. And, I'm going to ruin your business. And she says something really derogatory to his family. He turns, and there's video of this, he turns and calls her an effing B. And I think he was well within his rights to do so. At that point, the deputies who are on high alert, probably on edge, thinking that something was going to happen, they see it, they run over, this deputy puts hands on Scott, and Scott doesn't know who's grabbing him, he I think lawfully is resisting, and is taken to the ground, and that's one of the iconic pictures of him turned over, when they turned him over with handcuffs on, bleeding from his mouth. And that's been a symbol for all fathers and mothers as a parent who is standing up to protect his child. And he was arrested for obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct. Believe it or not, a guy who just went there to exercise his constitutional rights, charged with a crime. And the crime was Ziegler, the superintendent, in my opinion, lying and trying to cover up a horrible act that had happened to a student.
Now, I'm going to jump ahead. How did he get charged with domestic terrorism? Or did he actually get charged?
And that's a very good point. So this is how this goes on. And I'm not trying to go along with the story. So he gets arrested. He gets charged. He has another attorney at the time in General District Court. He's convicted of both charges. Buddha Bibarai, who is the Soros-backed prosecutor of Loudoun County. George Soros funded her. She's the defund the police, let everybody go, no cash bail, everybody leaves prosecutor. She prosecutes it, has a myriad of Commonwealth's attorneys who would prosecute misdemeanors. She goes down there, prosecutes, asks for jail time. Judge doesn't give him jail time. He appeals. We have a right of appeal in Virginia from the General District Court to the Circuit Court. He then hires me, and then we start winning. I got the obstruction of justice charge dismissed. They didn't fill out the paperwork on the back properly of the warrant upon conviction, and had filed motions in limine, and we're getting ready for a trial on the disorderly conduct. But I also got Buddha Bibarai, the Soros-backed prosecutor, recused from the case because she was biased against Scott. That harmed his constitutional right to a fair trial. So I got her recused, and a special prosecutor was appointed. And of course, the liberal left is just all up in arms. I mean, they weren't winning, and we were getting ready for trial here in September, and in that, fighting all the way. And this is just a father who just wanted to listen to a school board meeting. He didn't ask for this. I think if we had given, if I say, hey, Scott, I've got a time machine, we can go backwards in time. We'll go right before that moment before your daughter was raped, and you can stop it. He'd be jumping in that thing, pressing the buttons. I mean, he's never asked for this, but he's still fighting for his daughter. And I think, Shep, he stands as a symbol for all of us dads.
Absolutely.
Every parent who before was trusting the school system with our children. Get on the bus, go to the school, not paying attention. This, because of COVID, really ripped the curtain back on critical race theory, on transgender policies, on indoctrination of our children, and really woke up America's parents to say, wait a minute. The primacy of learning about sex education, the primacy of our child growing up and determining who they are, that's our job.
It's to the parent.
Not the school's job. And remember what Terry McAuliffe said when he was in a debate with Glenn Youngkin, our current governor. He said parents don't have a right to be involved in the education of our child. And that turned the whole election.
Sure.
So, the Loudoun County events have created a symbol for all of us parents, and I hope that we continue to maintain that. So,
well, how did he get to the domestic terrorism?
Okay, so believe it or not, the National School Board Association, NSBA, then either was asked by the Justice Department or asked the Justice Department to investigate parents, that the parents were the enemy. They were trying to push back on this and using, as we're seeing now, our government's Justice Department as a weapon. And that's when the U.S. Attorney General, through them, might have said, these parents are domestic terrorists, and then they republished that in a letter to the Justice Department, accusing Scott Smith as one of many domestic
defamation
terrorists.
of character, maybe.
Absolutely, at the time, but I think, and a malicious prosecution. So we've been fighting that as well. He's not a domestic terrorist. He's a dad who's standing up and protecting his daughter. I mean, if that's domestic terrorism, you can call me that too. And so we had trial coming up on September 25th. And in June, end of June, the governor had approached through his intermediaries, not directly, that they wanted to pardon him, that they thought what had happened to Scott was
good for
an
them.
Injustice. We declined at the time. We were like, man, we don't want to be a political football, but the governor demonstrated that this was not about politics. He felt so strongly about this. So we really appreciated that. And we came back, we had some more discussions. And at that time, and Eric Olson, the special prosecutor, said absolutely. He thought that was a fine way to do it. And the governor talked with Scott. And on Sunday, went on to the Fox News Sunday and announced that he was pardoning it and pardoning his Scott Smith, my client, and then executed the pardon that morning. And we sent out a press release, which you've read, that Scott wrote, and I just think this is one of the most incredible pardons I've ever read. I've seen absolute pardons before, but not this. And if you don't mind, I just want to read the whereas clauses real quick because I think it's important. Commonwealth of Virginia Executive Department, to whom all these presents shall come greetings. Whereas in May of 2021, Scott Smith's daughter was the victim of a violent sexual assault in the restroom of Loudoun County High School, for which the assailant was later found criminally responsible. And whereas in June of 2021, Scott Thomas Smith exercised his constitutional right to attend a public meeting of the Loudoun County School Board to observe the proceedings, during which time the community member threatened to spread false and malicious information about Mr. Smith's business with the intent to damage his reputation. And whereas, after an ensuing verbal confrontation, Scott Thomas Smith was charged with obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct. And whereas Scott Thomas Smith was convicted in the General District Court of the County of Loudoun on August 17, 2021, of obstruction of justice and disorderly conduct after pleading not guilty. I was not his lawyer at the time. And whereas, on appeal, Scott Thomas Smith's conviction for obstruction of justice was dismissed with prejudice before trial, due to irregularities not attributable to Scott Thomas Smith. And whereas on appeal, the Loudoun County Circuit Court issued an order disqualifying the original prosecutor in Scott Thomas Smith's case due to concerns about the integrity of the prosecution, the impartiality of the Commonwealth's attorney, and specific findings that Scott Smith's due process rights were in jeopardy. Whereas Scott Thomas Smith has been publicly and falsely accused of domestic terrorism, as you just said there, Shep, and hate crimes for attempting to advocate for his daughter, a victim of violent sexual assault. And whereas upon careful deliberation and review of the circumstances of the matter, I have decided it is just and appropriate to grant this absolute pardon that reflects Scott Thomas Smith's factual innocence of disorderly conduct for which he was convicted on August 17th, 2021. Now, therefore, I, Glenn A. Youngkin, Governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, in accordance with the authority granted to me under Article 5, Section 12 of the Constitution of Virginia, do hereby grant unto Scott Thomas Smith this absolute pardon from the conviction for disorderly conduct handed down by the General District Court of the County of Loudoun on August 17th, 2021. Powerful, powerful story.
Sometimes words can have different interpretations and people read things, they can get twisted. Not this.
No. Pretty clear.
This is very, very direct.
Yep.
It is very clear and precise. And the thing that I like about it, he put absolute pardon in all caps.
Yeah.
It is not to be misinterpreted.
No.
And the way this is laid out, it's very well written. It really makes the Commonwealth's attorney and the Loudoun School Board look like a bunch of jackasses for even attempting this. Mm-hmm. This disputes every fact that they tried to present.
Yeah. And you know what they're doing
to prosecute this man.
That side, the liberals, Buddha Bibarai, put it on X, formerly known as Twitter, that this was a political stunt by the governor during an election season. And Jeff Shapiro, a columnist for the Richmond Times, said basically the same thing. And I can tell you, one, like I told you before, the governor was interested, as he said, Scott never should have been charged in giving a pardon back in June. Okay, we're the ones that delayed it, not the governor. The timing is on us because Scott was respectfully declining it. Okay, number two, now I was on the radio again, this morning with John Reed. What you're seeing is the liberals are attacking his daughter. You know, the same liberals that want to claim victimhood, like this Susanna Gibson, this candidate for House of Delegates, is attacking his daughter. when the guy, as this pardon says, was convicted of raping her in juvenile court.
The sad part is the pardon.
They have no shame.
The pardon makes it go away for Mr. Smith. Unfortunately, the rape and the sexual assault never goes away for his daughter.
No, and she'll be dealing with it for the rest of her life.
I look at it too. This was such a.
And he never asked for this too. He didn't want to be in the spotlight. He was a plumber, having a good time,
this was
having a good life.
This was such a big issue when Governor Youngkin got elected. So I'm happy to see him actually
Take a stand
and take action on something, not just say it during an election, to your point,
But do it.
but have an opportunity to actually do it.
Yeah.
And so,
He's good to his word.
yeah.
And really, it's not a political stunt. Buddha Bibarai says, the Commonwealth attorney, this is a political stunt. She's like the evil Knievel of political stunts. And I mean, that's rich for her to say. And what do you think she was doing in prosecuting him? That was a political stunt to try to squelch parents' rights and to tamp down any kind of resistance to the way government was being run in Loudoun County and in a larger version throughout the United States at the time that we were all now alerted to. And so, we put out a press release, and I'm just going to read you like one of the quotes from him. All right. After the pardon, what Scott said was this, quote, "What happened to my daughter was horrible but preventable tragedy that she will have to deal with for the rest of her life. And the way the public school system, the school board, the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office and SRO department, and the Commonwealth's Attorney's Office, the way they handled this situation was abhorrent and completely unacceptable. My family has been living a nightmare that no family in America should have to endure. But rather than sit quietly and take it, I decided to stand up against the government. And for that, I was branded a domestic terrorist and charged with crimes that I did not commit. I want to thank Governor Youngkin for his declaration that I'm innocent and for his absolute and unconditional pardon. While I was extremely confident in my lawyer's abilities to defend me in court, I'm grateful that the governor recognizes that our justice system has been both weaponized and politicized to the point where my ability to receive a fair trial was in jeopardy. And while this pardon closes one chapter in this ongoing battle, a new chapter has now begun. I will continue to fight for parents and their children who are affected by these misguided and dangerous school policies. My family intends to pursue legal action in the federal courts to hold the Loudoun County public school system accountable for putting its own interest above the safety of both my daughter and the families and communities that it was supposed to serve. And I also intend to pursue other legal remedies in order to hold those elected county officials who pursued this malicious prosecution of me accountable for their malfeasance. And let me be clear, Scott Smith concludes, I am not a domestic terrorist. I'm just a father who will go to the ends of the earth to protect his daughter. I will not ever give up in that endeavor until my family is both protected and fully vindicated. Bravo, Scott
Strong
Smith.
words.
A real hero, a real American hero who is under siege from the liberal left for daring to stand up to protect his daughter. But he's standing up for all of us parents who put their kids, and I put my children through the public school system, and I have fears. All my children went through public school. I went to public school. And I used to have some trust in it, but I don't any longer. And good for Scott. Bravo, Scott.
Well, Hermie, you mentioned that you're proud of Governor Youngkin for taking a stand and doing what they say that they are going to do or what they campaigned on. But we're going to talk here in a few minutes about some other politicians that may be on following suit.
Hi, folks. This is Hermie Sadler. Thanks for listening to our all-new podcast, Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator. I hope you are enjoying the show as much as Senator Stanley and I enjoy bringing it to you. Whether you're a family traveling together or a truck driver hauling freight up and down the highway, I hope you will take the time to visit one of our Sadler Travel Plaza locations in Virginia and North Carolina. Sadler Travel Plaza locations are licensed dealer locations for Pilot Travel Centers. And we also carry Shell Motiva petroleum products for our four-wheel friends. We pride ourselves on providing one-stop shopping for service, food, and entertainment. Our food options include Five Guys Burgers and Fries, Quiznos, Dairy Queen, Hermie Sadler's Faux Show Bar and Grill, Victory Lane Restaurant, Hunt Brothers Pizza, Dunkin' Donuts, and much, much more. Our locations include Sadler Travel Plaza in South Hill, located off I-85 at Exit 12. The Sadler Travel Plaza of Emporia, which is conveniently located on Exit 11B off I-95. and Sadler Travel Plaza on Highway 58 in Suffolk. We also have our North Carolina location, Sadler Travel Plaza in Dunn, North Carolina. That's exit 75 off I-95. We appreciate all of our customers, and Bill and I appreciate you listening to Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator, powered by Pace-O-Matic.
Hey, this is Bill Stanley, Hermie Sadler's sidekick on this podcast. When I'm not in Richmond at the Capitol or doing this podcast, my real job for the past 27 years is as a trial attorney with the Stanley Law Group. Here at the Stanley Law Group, we represent our clients in every courthouse in the Commonwealth. No problem is too small for us to solve. No case is too big for us to win. Whether it's criminal charges, traffic offenses, civil disputes, litigation matters of any sort, we handle it all. We make sure that we treat every client like family because they are to us. Your problem is our problem. Your success is our success because we hate to lose more than we love to win. And believe me, we win a lot. Don't believe me? Go ask Hermie. I'm his favorite lawyer, and he hates lawyers. So give us a call at 540-721-6028 and let us help you. Or visit our website at www.vastanleylawgroup.com. That's www.vastanleylawgroup.com. At the Stanley Law Group, we'll make sure we're the lawyers that you swear by and not at.
I guess it's okay we just talk about the obvious. I'm glad to see that you, Senator Stanley, on this issue have been able to work this closely with Governor Youngkin. Both of y'all, for the good of the cause, have been able to kind of look past the fact that, let's be honest, our skill game lawsuit, we're at odds with the governor's office. Not necessarily the governor himself, I wouldn't say, but the Commonwealth of Virginia, the governor, the attorney general, a lot of legislators. I mean, we're at odds. So that goes to show that when something is right, then the governor and his team and you, not only as a legislator, but as an attorney, are able to put what's important first to get something done. And eventually maybe that same concept will come to the forefront in our fight, which, we call it the skill game lawsuit, but for me, it's about protecting the free market, free enterprise, capitalism, fair government, level playing field. But it is a giant that we are fighting in the casino industry. I mean, they have lots of people, they have lots of money, lots of power, lots of influence. So it's certainly a David versus Goliath, but I'm happy that you, Senator Stanley, and Governor Youngkin were able to get this win.
Yeah, and it's big because I think it's symbolic as well as it impacts the Smith family. I mean, they can close that chapter, as he said. But he's not giving up the fight, which I think is brave of him, very courageous. But Governor Youngkin did the right thing, and he's being excoriated from the left as somehow calling it a political stunt, which I know. And listen, I had a conversation with him. This is his conviction on a personal level, and he had the power to do something about it. He had a power to take out of the justice system's hands what may have been an unfair process, which might have jeopardized Scott Smith's reputation and liberty, and use the power wisely in the governor's office through the pardon ability which he possesses under our state constitution.
And I said what I said a moment ago about, look, these two cases, the Scott Smith case and our skill game lawsuit, are completely different issues.
But they still deal with government overreach and intrusion.
I say
on a general level.
I say that what encourages me about Governor Youngkin is because you were in a room and I was in the building one night when someone from the casino side asked, or tried to put pressure on Glenn Youngkin to side with the casinos and against small businesses. And with the business acumen that Glenn Youngkin has, he made the comment back to this person, "I'm for a level playing field." He said that. So ultimately, that's what we want.
Right.
We don't want
And when he says level playing field, he's saying, I want small businesses and business owners
Have
like
the
you
opportunity
to be able to engage in this emerging industry that
Right.
we've allowed here in
Right.
the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Right.
Right or wrong, it's here. It's
Right.
probably here to stay. Why are we only allowing out-of-state interests to take over?
Yeah.
And so that's, and maybe we should talk about that now. Because I think as this lead-in provides, we didn't intend, just like Scott, we didn't intend to run to the front. This was not for publicity. You and I got together in this very place right here, and we had talked about it. You'd been to my Senate office. You knew I was against gambling.
Right.
But the way that you articulated it to me made a lot of sense. Because, and we've said it before on this podcast, we've said it publicly. Look, I'm against gambling, and I don't think it should be here. It's awful. It's a vice, and it leads to bad things. But if you're going to do it, I'm against unfairness even more than gambling. And if you open the door to gambling, then you ought to let small businesses and Virginians participate in the marketplace. That's common sense. And so we sat here in this very condominium that night, overlooking the mountains. The stars were out, and there was a mouse in our condo, in my condo, that we chased later. That's a story we've told before. But you and I sat there and said, "Wait a minute, this isn't right."
Was any fireball involved?
No, there wasn't any fireball, but there was some Crown Raw. And we were both partaking, and we were having a really good, deep conversation about a lot of things. And we came to the conclusion, I thought at that moment in time, listen, if we let this unconstitutional law, because the way the law was written, SB 971, it was unconstitutional. And it would be putting, as you said, you were the one that brought this point up, it'd be putting people in jail for having these skill games in their convenience store or truck stop or bar or restaurant for something that is not a crime or should not be a crime. And it's only being made a crime because the casino interests wanted to exclude skill games
Right.
from
They want a
arena.
monopoly,
Yeah,
period.
Exactly. And
Period.
so we kind of banded together and said, okay, bud, let's fight this thing. And I don't think we knew how really at the time. We were throwing out those ideas, and what we came up on was when we looked at these skill games, this is not a slot machine, which is a game of chance. The difference between a game of skill, games of chance were always banned in Virginia, but games of skill, which is man versus machine, Paul Bunyan or whatever, that kind of.
And to put in layman's terms, a game of chance, you put a quarter, nickel, dollar, $5, $10, whatever the number is, you pull the lever and you hope that it's your turn.
But you
Which
have
is
no
not a
control
good
on the
strategy.
outcome.
But you have no control over the outcome.
What is a game of skill?
And we have proven through this trial to this point that the outcome of a game of skill is determined predominantly by the skill of the player. And we proved this in our trial to this point
and over.
before we got the initial injunction. These games were sent to ABC for them to make their own independent analysis of these games outside of our lawsuit before there was ever a lawsuit even filed, and they determined the same thing. But, I've said this 100 times, and I'll say it again just for people that may be listening for the first time. We have been successful to this point because we are right in the constitutional protection that these games, because of the interactive nature with the player, they're protected free speech. But the reason, going back to your point about our conversation,
And that's really the crux of our argument.
sure it is.
And just like a video game, which the Supreme Court of the United States has said previously, a video game that transmits a message and has that interaction with the player, even however slight and even not redeeming in value,
Right.
still is protected free speech because of that interaction with the user. And what they try to do, this is our argument why their ban can't stand constitutional muster. It's unconstitutional. But that was, they tried to ban skill games, but they meant the machines that are in the convenience stores, the Queen of Virginia games, Pacematic makes. And what they were doing was banning Galaga, Miss Pac-Man, because that's a game of skill.
Skee ball.
Games at the state fair.
Skee ball. And even the crane game where you go and pick up the stuffed animal, which requires your skill to get that teddy bear out. And you put money in and you get something out in return. They were making
You wouldn't be able
those
to go to the
things
state
illegal.
fair and pay and shoot a basketball and get a stuffed animal.
Correct. And they didn't.
Yeah,
they
but
were so
Dave and
sloppy.
Buster's.
At Dave and Buster's entirely. In
Chuck
fact,
E. Cheese.
yeah, I mean entirely a gambling operation because it had skill games in them,
How about billiards?
which was absurd. But that's
But let
how
me just say
sloppy
one
they
more
were
thing.
writing the statute SB 971, and then we'll even talk about how they did it again in the budget.
But what I'm saying is the reason why we've been successful is because of all the reasons you just described. But the reason what pushed me to actually push to fight this is because of the free market system. We're right by the law, yes, but what was wrong to me, which was more important or just as important as the legal argument, was the ethical argument that how can an industry that is moving into the Commonwealth of Virginia have the ability, because they've got money, power, influence, and lobbyists, how are we allowing them to create their own laws and to buy from our General Assembly a government-enabled monopoly where the government says, don't go to these small businesses. You have to go to where we tell you to go to spend your money. And that's just not what the free market system is all about. That's not what fair government is all about. And so that's why I'm glad we've been successful, and I'm glad we're on the right side of the law. But the bigger reason why this fight is important is because I believe the free market system and capitalism, fair government, level playing field, those things are worth protecting. And our Constitution, the Virginia Constitution and the U.S. Constitution, we've got so many ways in which we get away from that.
Yeah.
And a lot of things, if we would just go back and live by what our forefathers taught us or wanted us to live by, what's written in this Constitution.
And by the way, they used to play skill games too.
Yeah.
Well, Hermie, even some of these, all of these politicians, they're actually taking an oath which swears to that they must affirm what you just mentioned.
You got the oath?
I do have the oath.
The one I would take every time that I'm sworn in, like in January, if I'm reelected to represent the 7th Senate District, which I hope I am, I would take this very oath. You have it?
I do.
Read it.
I do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Virginia, of the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that I will faithfully and impartially discharge all the duties incumbent upon me as, and you would say your position,
Senator, right.
according to the best of my ability. So help me God.
So help me God. And I take that very seriously. But remember some key words in there. Support the Constitution, defend the Constitution, but faithfully
And impartially
discharge my duties.
Yeah.
Well, when you've got the casinos putting the thumb on the scale and then saying, hey, Shep, for your candidacy, let us hold a fundraiser for you. Let's give you a big check. Is that
It's not really impartial.
I mean, it may not be a quid pro quo, but I don't think you can impartially do the job that way. And look, I have companies that donate money to me, and I voted against. Sometimes I like the legislation that might affect them. Sometimes I don't, and they know it.
So my
but
problem,
I'm not swayed by the amount of money that they gave me for my campaign. I'm swayed by my oath.
Your oath.
To discharge my duties.
So in the
as required.
last 3 weeks, we now know that the court in our case came out with some rulings related to the continuation of our injunction to allow these small businesses to operate as we are getting ready to go to final trial in December. So once these rulings came out, then the shenanigans started up again with the Attorney General's office.
Again.
With the Churchill Downs people. So they write these amicus briefs trying to sway the Supreme Court, and then you've got a handful that looks like about 11 legislators that said, oh, yeah, I agree with that. Let me sign on to these amicus briefs. And the main point of our lawsuit that you know better than I do is the constitutional protection of these games and small businesses. So we've got 11 legislators that in this particular case, I'm not sure are
following the oath.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And just to bring the listener who might be listening for the first time up to date, we filed our lawsuit. We had a 7-hour trial at Christmas time 2 years ago.
Yep.
And we got a temporary injunction for a trial that was supposed to go the next year. Mm-hmm. Well, what happened was, how do you say that?
What had happened was,
well, that was kind of uniform.
That's a Southern Virginia.
The casino lobbyist, we don't legislate through the budget. A budget is a piece of legislation that has a 2-year effect. And we're told not to legislate through the budget. So we win. We point out the constitutional flaws in the SB 971, the bill banning skill games. And what do? They put it in a conference report where they rewrite the criminal code, rewrite the code section that bans skill games, trying to be clever and taking out the stuff that they know they got their butts whooped on, and they change it again, thinking, well, we're going to fix your wagon, Hermie. We're going to get skill games banned. Who would have thought of that except for someone who's being influenced by the casinos? So they put it in the budget. It was an up or down vote, never debated, never brought to the public. For transparency's sake, it was stuck in a budget, and it would charge people criminally for the rest of time, and not expire ever, like the budget expires next year.
I'm going to cost you $25 right now. But don't the dumbasses realize that the budget's only for 2 years? The law would essentially go away in 2 years, unless it stayed currently in the budget.
So, in fact, and maybe we should play that clip in a bit. I railed against that on the floor of the Senate, and for that very thing. So they put it in the budget. We have to refile our case, amend our pleading. We go back to court. Attorney General's office files pleas and bars and demurs again. We're supposed to be going to trial, and now we're fighting again, starting over. We have the temporary injunction. We go in there. We fight hard. The judge grants some stuff for the government, overrules some stuff that they sought, and granted some stuff for us, and said, okay, we're back again. Let's pick a trial date. And then, so he said, I'm going to extend the injunction, okay? And which is enlarging the injunction on time. Same injunction on the old law and the one as amended through the budget.
And that's illegal.
Right.
In Virginia.
For months, the Attorney General's office would not sign an order. So we had the ruling from the bench, but not the order for months. So the games are operating from our first injunction. Unfortunately, the Wild Wild West has emerged, but those non-skill games, those games of chance, VGTs, video game terminals that popped up, they popped up after the injunction went in, after the prohibition of skill games went in place. Our injunction does not address those, but now we've got a little bit it getting out of control. So we go again. Judge enlarges the injunction on time, says let's pick a trial date. And this is after we got the injunction. They appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court overruled their appeal, denied their appeal. We get another injunction on the new law, and now, guess what they did when the order was finally entered? Months after the actual hearing, they appealed again. It's what's called a snap appeal. So we're now before the Supreme Court. We've got a trial supposedly coming up in December again, right around the 2-year anniversary when we started, and now we're on appeal. And what Hermie's talking about when he was talking about these 11 legislators is, so Attorney General files an appeal of the judge's ruling, which they can't do, okay? They're out of time. They really messed this one up. We file our response. But then these amicus briefs that Hermie was talking about, friend of the court briefs, are filed by, guess who? Churchill, the casinos, and 11 legislators, most of whom live or represent the district where the casinos are. I mean,
they're not personally affected.
You look at the senators and House of Delegate members that live or represent the area near a casino, they're on this brief. 11 of them. And 2 of them are leaving our favorite people who filed the amicus brief last time. Senator Janet Howell, who's retiring, and Senator Tommy Norman, who's retiring. And then they added some more.
Well, Senator, for them to sign
and they hired the biggest firm in Virginia to do it. McGuire Woods, who, by the way, represents
the casino.
Oh, my God, you're right.
But for them to sign on to the amicus briefs, don't they have to show personal harm
to be friends
of the court? Doesn't that have to
you
be
have to have standing
harm?
To invoke the court, but a friend of the court brief is just trying to say, hey, let me give you some advice from my perspective. We objected to it, and it'll be accepted, but we then get to respond, and we've been writing those briefs, and that's what you've been reading, Hermie, as our crack legal team that's assembling today has been writing those things, but we've never stopped trying to get ready for trial. So where we are right now is still have the injunction, still have trial. That may be moved to next year now, again, because of what they're doing, fiddle farting around, and now we're on appeal in the Supreme Court. So all of that is
So what you're saying is that
pending.
This court case, this lawsuit, has not allowed for the proliferation of the illegal games and the vape shops and all of that stuff. It's actually been caused by what the legislator has created, not the lawsuit.
They took away the enforcement by ABC by ignoring or not thinking about what the unintended consequences was going to be of Ralph Northam signing the initial ban bill to begin with. And what that did, it created a vacuum.
Because the skill games were operating, only the skill games.
We were operating
Legally.
skill games in convenience stores, truck stops, restaurants, and bars. We were paying a flat tax, a pretty hefty flat tax, and there was a very effective way for ABC to provide oversight and enforcement. Tax was being collected by the distributors of the games, as it was testified in our injunction hearing back in December.
$215 million.
Had virtually ABC, one of the executives from ABC testified in court that they had virtually no issues with oversight, with collecting the tax, with enforcement.
No crime.
None of that. And so...
And stores were saying that they felt safer, the workers felt safer because the people that played the skill games were responsible and they knew them, and it cut down actually on the riffraff, believe it or not.
Been one of the most frustrating parts of this is the other side, the casinos, all these people that are on the other side of this argument, they want the people that don't understand or are not as involved in it or not as educated on this issue, they want those people to think Hermie and Bill's skill game lawsuit is creating all of this proliferation of illegal games in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And that it could not be further from the truth. Could not be further from the truth. But Bill, my question for you is this.
No, wait, he makes a really good point. The people that, it's not the gray machines, as they call them, the skill games that created the Wild Wild West, where we now have these video game terminals, games of chance proliferating in vape shops and parlors and all that stuff. It's because when they put the ban in, they slipped in through the front door, the back door, because skill games were all turned off. They abided by that law until the injunction was in place that we got, you and I got,
6 months later,
that turned the machines back on. But in that time, in that frame, all of these illegal games of chance swept in the marketplace. Criminal underworld was bringing in these games.
You go into all these stores and these stickers would say, "This is not a game of skill nor a game of chance."
Right. to flout the law.
Yeah.
And
we don't know what the hell it is.
No, yeah, because we legislators, being pushed by an industry that doesn't know how to combat this, wrote a crappy-ass law that now the people of Virginia were paying a price because these games of chance are proliferating. And then when we came back with the injunction, it just turned the games on that were already registered by the ABC. But the court cannot create an enforcement through that injunction, nor can it require those businesses to pay tax. That is, of course, with the legislature. But we've had two years of legislative process, 2 General Assembly sessions, where we could have fixed this, where we could have taxed it and regulated it fairly, understanding the constitutional protections that skill games have. Did we do it? No. Why didn't we do it? Because those casinos, in my opinion, still want that monopoly. If they eliminate the competition, I would guarantee you, Hermie, that they would come back and say, hey, General Assembly, when we banned skill games and took them out of convenience stores, what we need to do? We need to put our slot machines in those convenience stores, bars, and truck stops and restaurants to help the economy, to help our business.
But they would control them.
Exactly.
And get the revenue.
Exactly. And pay the lower tax. Notice that they're bringing in millions and millions of dollars in these casinos.
They got a sweet tax deal.
Bristol, Danville, and Portsmouth, right? Those are the 3 that are open. Do you see what a pittance the state is getting from that revenue?
Sweetheart deal.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they got one of the lowest tax rates ever. It was a ripoff. And in these economies that they're in, Bristol, which has suffered from NAFTA and CAFTA, trying to rebuild the coal industry, petering out. Danville, again, textile and industry manufacturing went overseas, harmed their economy. They're trying to rebuild. Portsmouth, same thing. Lower income areas, they're getting a pittance for having these things.
Well, let me ask you
in
something.
Their areas.
Does the SEC don't they address monopolies?
State Corporation Commission. Well, see, utilities are granted monopolies. Because,
okay.
So that, and utilities, we basically talk about like cable, electric, gas, water, which is a municipal thing.
But I thought like if corporations were going to merge, I guess at some point the size on those corporations, the merger would have to be approved by some part of the government, correct?
Sure.
What is that called?
Well, that's usually federal government. SEC
Okay,
doesn't
not
really do
on
that.
the state level.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
They really don't involve themselves in that. What they do is in a regulatory system where, say, Dominion Electric or APCO or co-ops are providing that utility service, they are allowed under the law to make a reasonable rate of return, but not to gouge you.
Sure.
Although it feels like gouging. And so in that regulatory scheme, they can regulate what they can charge, what expenses they can recoup, and even acquisitions of other businesses or things that help the utility, which give them, because we've granted them special status to give them a regional, because APCO's out in the west,
Right.
Dominion's, in the east, and then you've got VEPCO, Virginia Power Company up in the north, and then you got co-ops in the little rural areas. They're giving them regional territories, but so they have a monopoly so that service is consistent, not interrupted, and they require them to do certain things. And that's the regulatory scheme for the State Corporation Commission.
So if these casinos, you brought up the word federal, if these casinos are out of state of Virginia and money's going back to those states, does that not make it federal on any level?
No.
Okay.
No, because remember, the state is regulating it. But this isn't this is not an industry that can be regulated for monopolistic purposes. It's not providing an essential service like the power company does.
Right.
And so they can't. So what we are in America and Virginia is anti-monopoly. But we have granted them special status, and I think that's a really good point, Shep, when they don't have that right. They can't pick and choose, as you say, Hermie, all the time, winners and losers on who can be in the gaming industry and who can't. That's un-American. That's what we're fighting against. That government overreach is what we're talking about. And the government overreach is with a private company, publicly traded, who knows, the casinos and Churchill Downs. Those are the ones trying to run the show. I mean, you've got even Rosie's, which is a game emporium,
That's
showing
what
up
people
in
don't understand.
Greensville.
Rosie's is planning
And they
to
don't want
open
anybody
a
else there except
location
Rosie's.
in Emporia on September the 25th. That place is 50 feet from the back door of one of my convenience stores that we have been legally operating skill games for years.
Right.
And
Didn't you say 26
if the
years?
government is trying to say, you can't go to Hermes Place, you have to go to Rosie's to play the game. But here's another frustrating point that I want to make, and then we'll start wrapping this thing up. The casino industry and all of their lobbyists and investors and even legislators and all the people that are on the other side of this argument for 3 years have been trying their best to confuse the general public. They want the general public to think, boy, Hermie and Bill's lawsuit has created the Wild Wild West. All these games, they don't want to be regulated. They came in the middle of the night, the back door, could not be further from the truth, because all we have been fighting for from the beginning.
But it's been a winning narrative for them, too. They've been winning and throwing us in with the real bad.
But here's the
Yeah.
truth. Our industry has always wanted to be regulated and taxed.
Alan Joseph wants regulation and tax.
We did the regulation and tax during the year that we had it go into a COVID relief fund.
And it was successful.
We've been trying to get them to the table, meaning the casino
Lobby.
lobby, to the table.
67 lobbyists, by the way.
We want to get them to the
registered
table to
in
say,
Virginia.
hey, the truck stops and convenience stores and restaurants and bars are not your enemy. All the illegals and the proliferation and the vape shops and all the unlicensed locations, they're your enemy. Listen, let's sit down at a table. Let's decide how many games that people that do it the right way at convenience stores, truck stops, restaurants, and bars, how many games you can have, create a reasonable tax and regulation system just like we had to run those businesses. We can stay in our lane, do our business. The casino can stay in their lane and do their business. And guess what? Let's work together to rid all of the illegal games across the Commonwealth of Virginia. But they had to this point have refused anything short of, we're the giant, we're the monster, we're going to get our way, we're going to bulldoze our way to a monopoly, and to hell with the constitutional rights of these small businesses, and we just can't let that happen.
Right. And that is really Shep, what I'm just mystified about is that legislators don't see what the casinos are doing to us. They're keeping $750 million from helping our schools become modern, educating our children, helping kids out of poverty. Because their concern is greater than Virginia. They're putting themselves first over the state that granted them the authority to operate in this industry space.
And Hermie said before, I think it's 26 years. I think the listeners need to know that. You didn't start doing these games 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Since
Some
before
type
9/11.
of a version of a skill game at the truck stop in Emporia since the mid-1980s.
Back when Hermie had a workout room.
That's almost 40 years.
They changed the narrative. When our lawsuit first came out, we said, okay, then it was the family entertainment exceptions. That was a problem. So they kind of pulled that out.
Right.
But what they have not been able to get past the court on is the constitutional protection of these games. And as I said before, when people are the other side is going to try their best to confuse the general public on what is the difference between a game of skill and a game of chance. And it's quite simply what we said before. A game of chance, you put your money in, you pull the lever, and it's just luck, 100% luck.
You're hoping
that it's your turn to get
it's like
the
a scratch-off
777.
ticket. There's no skill to a scratch-off ticket. That's a game of chance.
Then they say this other thing. The answer that I get a lot, even from Barry Knight, who's head of appropriations and is on the casino side.
Sure.
Even though he's a small business owner himself. Clearly. But anyway, what I've heard him say to people before about skill games is when they question why he would be so adamantly against them, he says, well, I don't like the way they came into Virginia in the middle of the night when nobody was looking. And proved at trial.
That's not true.
We proved at trial, Shep, that the manufacturers sent these variations of the games to ABC, asked them to do their own independent analysis of the skill involvement in determining the outcome of these games. And once they got approval from ABC by letter that we produced at trial, then the game started to be, to put into the locations, but it wasn't on Barry Knight's terms.
Right.
So he's mad about it.
Yeah.
So that's really what that's about.
Well, and it really comes down to this, and what their strategy is right now. Allow the casino industry would rather allow the proliferations of these games of chance to occur. They would rather have the criminal element be involved, because then they can lump in the Hermie Sadlers of the world, those small business owners that are doing it the right way and legally, and then they take off the white hat and they're wearing the black hat like the illegal games are. Ultimately, that's their game, because then they can say everything's bad, so you got to get rid of it all. That's their ultimate goal, and they're hurting the Commonwealth of Virginia and small businesses as a result. And let me tell you this, Shep. There are people, convenience store owners. I represent one. I have a friend, Mike Joins, an attorney. He's also works with me on the Scott Smith case. We are defending people in court right now who are charged with crimes based on this Fakaktis law and its amendment.
Oh, what law?
Fakaktis. That's Yiddish.
That's almost like documents.
Cactus law. That we're fighting right now, that these people are charged with felonies, could lose their liberty and their business. And see, and do you think the casinos care about them? No, they want them to burn. That's just collateral damage to get their way. And that's why we fight. And that's why we're here doing what we're doing today, getting ready for your trial. And ladies and gentlemen, for those people those small businesses that listen to us all the time, now you are updated. And I want you to know that we're fighting for you.
Yeah.
We are fighting to preserve your right to be a part of this gaming industry. I don't like the gaming industry, but damn it, I'm going to fight for it.
One other point, quickly. This particular issue happens to deal with the gaming industry. But for me, if we don't fight, we allow the Commonwealth of Virginia, the people that are charged with and have the honor of representing and writing policy and laws for the Commonwealth, we allow them to set a precedent, to me, that says, this is gaming we're talking about now, but it could be any industry that may do business now or in the future in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we are allowing them to set a precedent that says if you've got enough money, power, and influence, you can bring your industry into the Commonwealth of Virginia, create your own laws to work by, and if needed, shut down other businesses that may be in competition with you because the government says so. That is a scary,
slippery slope
for the Commonwealth of Virginia to go down.
Well, and I kind of equated this. It's like letting the bear that lurks outside into your kitchen to rifle through your cabinet to eat.
Well, Bill, how about
And you think
ABC
you're
store?
placating the bear, but pretty soon you're fixing the bear eggs.
How about the
You
ABC
are being
stores?
led by the bear instead of the bear leading you, and that's what the casino industry is. They're leading the state. They're leading us around by our nose and dictating policy.
You got tail wagging the dog.
Right. They
How
are
about the
doing
ABC stores? To Hermie's point,
What about them?
the state controls that.
Well, yeah, but see, that is a state monopoly which came from prohibition.
Gotcha.
So ABC stores didn't exist until we again filed and put a constitutional amendment that banned all alcohol sales. So when it came back, then the alcohol beverage control, that's what it's
Kind of
called.
like what the casinos
created
may
that.
want to do with the slot machines and the convenience stores.
Amen, brother. You're right on the money. You are the hammer looking for a nail.
That's right.
And well done. And so, I think Hermie and I want to say to all people, whether you own a convenience store that has a skill game in it or not, or you're just a concerned Virginian or American, we're fighting government overreach. We're fighting the government to protect our constitutional rights. That's really the fight that we undertook that day, that night, on that porch right behind you, Hermie, when we made a decision to band together and fight the good fight. And dang nabbit, we've been successful.
It's really not
we'll
just
continue to be
limited to
successful.
Virginia.
No, it's
really not.
Look, I think, when you see this, because gambling is a topic that's coming up in a lot of legislatures, they're considering it in North Carolina. They're allowing sports book. Remember, that used to be bookies. That used to be illegal. Now it's all over the place. So Carolina sees the revenue that can be generated from that. They're looking at gaming, which will, affect all the Bristol and the Danville and the Portsmouth casinos, because now North Carolinians are coming over to gamble here.
Sure.
Just like the lotto. They came late to the lottery. That will dissipate that revenue, and that revenue will start going down. And then the casinos are going to say, we need new revenue. We need games of chance and convenience stores after they've wiped out small businesses, and they'll control those small businesses. That's letting the bear into the kitchen, and pretty soon you're fixing it scrambled eggs. And we can't let that happen. That's why we fight. And we're up against a big machine. We're up against big political influences.
Sure.
And we are not afraid.
Big money, too.
I have been threatened. I have been, excoriated. I have been lectured from other legislators time and time again. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do this. This could affect you. I don't care. I do what's right. That's the way my parents raised me, my mom and dad. And that I will always fight for the little guy. My mom used to say in my law practice, man, if you could charge more if you'd be a bigger a-hole. And I'm like, I feel like God gave me a talent, and I got to do it for the right reasons. Because I'm a lawyer and a politician, so when I get to heaven, they're going to be like, down escalator, start it. No, wait, I say beagles.
You have used a lot of big words today.
Have I?
I
You
am
written them
proud
down?
of you.
Well,
I don't know how to spell
I can
them.
show you
How the hell am I gonna
I
write
can
them
show you how
down?
to spell fakaktis. That's my favorite Yiddish word.
Fakaktis.
Yeah, you can swear in Yiddish without ever being, and a friend of mine got me a book, How to Swear in Yiddish. And so I've learned a lot of that. So
we go back to court as it stands now. We await word from the Supreme Court of Virginia.
We do.
Again.
We do. The briefs are being filed today.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, our responsive briefs to the amicus briefs that the 11 legislators filed and the casinos filed.
And you're saying that
And our
could
regular
potentially
briefs
affect
do.
our December trial date?
I think so. I mean, I think it does. The worst that can happen is the court remands it back to the trial judge to make the findings. They say he didn't make findings of the 4 elements of what an injunction requires, but he did. So that would be the worst. So he'd have to do that. He'd have to enter that order, and then they'd have a right to appeal that. Mm-hmm. So we could be on this hamster wheel for another year. What I'm hoping is that whatever happens, whether we get a permanent injunction, or if the injunction is continued into the next legislative year, because we have over 1/3 of that 140-member body between the House and Senate, 100 in the House, 40 in the Senate, over 1/3 of them are going to be brand new, not tainted by gray machines, gray games, that kind of stuff, not tainted, not beholden to the powers that are leaving that were against it for whatever reason, that they'll take a fresh look and decide we should keep $500,000 a year, and let's do something good with it and help society, rather than allowing the casinos to continue their monopoly and harm small businesses like convenience stores, truck stops, restaurants, and bars. People like Hermie.
I'd be curious to see if.
And Hermie, you even say, ain't like you're making a butt ton of money off this.
Well, there's so many games,
Off the
illegal games,
Yeah.
and these vape shops, back rooms, and stuff. It's really.
And those are illegal. They're
illegal, and
there is no question about
that's
anybody.
frustrating because the bad guys are making the money.
Yep.
Now
And not paying taxes.
not paying taxes
And not
But I'm
regulated.
curious. A couple things as we head towards December. Some of these legislators that have signed on, may or may not they be deposed at some point during this process. Maybe they be deposed. Maybe Virginia Lottery has a new director.
Well, Kelly G is on our deposition list, and she's moved over to the Secretary of the Commonwealth. I don't know you want to, but she's a very important witness for us. So those are all part of the strategies. We're about to go downstairs and
The
talk
people
about it at the conference room.
deserve to know from these people on a stand under oath why they have said what they said or why they feel the way they feel, because the facts on the business that the lottery is doing and the business that the casinos are doing, they're not being harmed by these small businesses operating these legal skill games, and we need to make sure the general public knows that.
And I want to make one point as we get ready to leave here. People have come to me and say, well, this podcast is sponsored by Pacematic. Pacematic makes the skill game. Now, your race team is sponsored by Pacematic. Pacematic makes the skill game. So you're shilling for the skill game. We were doing this podcast and that race team, whether Pacematic was there or not.
Right.
We even created the race team because we wanted to raise awareness in these rural areas that depended on skill games and those small businesses to raise awareness of what we were doing. And they decided when they looked at what we were doing and said, hey, can we be a part of this? We didn't ask
We
them.
already had
we
the
didn't solicit them.
podcast up and going,
Right.
and already had the framework for the race team going together.
Right.
And
Look, if they mess up, we're going to say it here on the
Hey,
podcast.
My dad says a lot, Hermie, they're going to talk about you whether you're riding or walking, so you might as well ride.
Now, and what would he call the casino lobby and the casinos?
Gangsters.
I was going to say motherfuckers, but what did I know?
Well, there you go. He finally had to get one in. Our lovely swear
Another
bear is
25
back.
bucks.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you've enjoyed this very insightful and I think really productive podcast episode. It's a lot of fun sitting around with the three of us doing this,
You
especially with
mean
this
me
beautiful
and you
vista.
and
I will say, guys,
He's got the
tomorrow
time.
I'm the double nickel. 55 tomorrow.
Oh, happy birthday, Shep.
Yep.
Happy
Wow.
birthday.
55 tomorrow.
Catching up to me. Well, that's
You
great.
look a day over 54.
Yeah.
How old are you? 60?
Shut your ass. I'm 56. So anyway, but we hope this is informative and that you also stand up for yourself like Scott Smith does against government overreach. We're seeing the government taking away our rights every day. We need to stand up against that, whether it's skill games or the Constitution or privacy or instructing your kids. We need to assert ourselves against an ever-growing government that doesn't put us first anymore. And the only people that put us first is us. And we're here fighting for you for that, son. That's why we do what we do. So we'll keep you informed as we move forward in the Supreme Court and get ready for trial. We're going to go downstairs right now and for the next 3 days work on this stuff to make sure that we get it right and get it perfect like we did before. And
Hermie, I'm
we'll
gonna see
give
you
the updates
Friday.
as they come.
Friday. We'll be
I'm
in
gonna see you
Saffield for
Friday.
the Families Embracing Autism Together golf event fundraiser for
Yep.
a group that's creating a new facility to provide services to special needs kids and families in Southside Virginia.
At Memory Makers, formerly.
We're going to tee it up Friday.
Well, Bill
I was
was
there.
playing with us, but he
was there last
kind
year.
of quit on the team.
I did not quit on the team.
We got through the whole show. See, you've been nice. Now he's going
You replaced me with some guy named Elvis, right?
Spock.
Spock. All right, same thing, right?
Yeah, but he hits the ball really far.
I hit it a couple times yesterday.
He won't lose a dozen balls.
Hey, listen.
On 4 holes.
If I didn't lose a dozen balls, guys like you would go out in the woods and try to find them, wouldn't have anything to do. So
Wasn't it
that's
fun,
helping the economy.
It was a great
That was a
time.
great time. Let's do it again. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. You can get this on your platform. Tell your friends. Spread the news. You can see us on Facebook. Leaning Right and Turning Left.
We need
podcast
some
on
likes and
Facebook.
shares.
At Sadler Senator, which is on Twitter or X, however you want to call it now. You can reach us at www.sadlerstanleyracing.com. Follow our race team, follow this podcast, and we hope we're entertaining.
And by the way, this Sunday, Sadler Stanley Racing is racing at Lonesome Pine in Coburn, Virginia.
Coburn, way out in Wise County.
And
that is owned by Rusty Wallace, that racetrack now. And so we're going out into the nature, and hopefully we'll bring home a dub. But we'll have Ryan Newman and Bobby Labonte running for us, and they were on last week's show. If you haven't listened to last week's show,
it's great, man.
It's a great episode. It's
Two
hilarious.
Hall of Famers together.
And really, let me recommend something on the way up, because I've been listening to the Gaston tapes. We called them the 3 shows that we taped. They are absolutely hilarious. Listen how big Shep Moss's strike zone is. Listen how
it's flexible.
How we fight the porn industry to keep it away from kids, and then retail our own stories when we were young adults and exposure to pornography.
It really is hilarious.
It is funny. I listened to it on the way up here, and I was laughing, and I've heard it like 5 times.
So if somebody wanted to be a sponsor, could they call you?
They can always call us. We'll be happy to have sponsors. You see, we get ads. But go through the library. We've talked to everybody, like the lieutenant governor. Joe Camerata and I talked about the Paula Jones case. We've had wrestlers, Kane on.
Mickey James.
Mickey James. We've had great people. We've had Ray Evernham, great people in racing. We've had Dale Earnhardt Jr. We have an incredible library. If you're just starting to listen to us, there's a lot of great evergreen content that you can listen to. And so thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week. I'm Virginia State Senator Bill Stanley. I'm on Wintergreen Mountain looking at Shep, and he's looking pretty good right now, and I'm leaning right.
And I'm Hermie Sadler, and I'm turning left. This is Leaning Right and Turning Left with Sadler and the Senator, powered by Pace-O-Matic. We appreciate y'all listening.
God bless you all.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson with SaveWithConrad.com. You've heard me bragging on the podcast for years about helping people save money on their current house, but did you know that I can help you with your next house as well? That's right, we can get you into your next house with 0 down. No money down loan programs are still available, and I know it sounds too good to be true, but we can do it for you. And by the way, home ownership is more affordable than you might think. We routinely turn renters into homeowners, and we hear back that their new house payment is more affordable than what they were paying in rent. Why would you keep doing that? Stop throwing your money away, paying for someone else's mortgage, and start building wealth for your family. And let my family help at SaveWithConrad.com. You don't need perfect credit to do this. We can improve credit scores down to the 500s, and it's worth mentioning, we never say no. We say not yet, but here's how. You need a game plan to buy a house, and that's where we come in at SaveWithConrad.com. We'll ask you, what down payment do you want to make? And 0 is an acceptable answer. And what monthly payment do you want? And then it's time to go shopping. Find out how easy it is and how affordable it is to become a homeowner at SaveWithConrad.com.